The confession that stopped me. Cold. Picture this. I'm sitting in my cozy London office, sipping a lukewarm cuppa, ready for another day of untangling people's messy lives. As a psychologist, I've heard it all. Cheating spouses, midlife crises, even the occasional, "I think my cat is plotting against me." But nothing prepared me for the bombshell that walked through my door one rainy Tuesday afternoon. A man, let's call him Tom, sat down, looked me dead in the eyes, and said, "Dr. Harper, my wife beats me." I nearly choked on my biscuit. Did I hear that right? A grown man built like a rugby player claiming his wife is knocking him about? I leaned forward, trying to keep my face neutral, but my brain was screaming, "Mate, what's the story here?" Buckle up, because this is the wildest case I've ever worked on. And trust me, it's not what you think. Let's rewind a bit. I'm Dr. Emily Harper, a psychologist based in London with 15 years of experience listening to people's deepest, darkest secrets. My office is a safe space. Think comfy armchairs, a box of tissues on the table, and a kettle that's always on. I've seen couples on the brink of divorce, teens rebelling against their parents, and everything in between. But Tom? He was different from the moment he walked in. Tom was in his late 30s, tall, broad-shouldered, with a handshake that could crush a walnut. He looked like the kind of bloke who'd help you move a sofa without breaking a sweat. But his eyes, they were nervous, darting around like he was expecting someone to jump out from behind my bookshelf. When he sat down, he fidgeted with his wedding ring, twisting it like it was burning his finger. I knew something big was coming, but I had no idea how big. The first red flags. Before Tom dropped his bombshell, he started with the usual pleasantries. "Nice weather we're having," he mumbled, despite the fact that it was pissing down outside. I nodded, jotting down "anxious demeanor" in my notebook. Then, out of nowhere, he blurted it. "My wife beats me." The room went silent. Even the clock on the wall seemed to pause, as if it was thinking, "Blimey, what's this about?" I asked him to repeat himself just to be sure I wasn't having some sort of biscuit-induced hallucination. He said it again, slower this time, his voice barely above a whisper. "Dr. Harper, my wife, Sarah, she hits me. Regularly." I'll be honest, my first thought was, is this guy having a laugh? But the look on his face, pure shame mixed with fear, told me this was no joke. I put down my pen, took a deep breath, and said, "All right, Tom, let's start from the beginning." Unraveling the mystery of Tom's marriage, the picture-perfect couple, or so it seemed. Tom's story begins. In our first session, Tom painted a picture of his life with Sarah, his wife of 7 years. On the surface, they were the kind of couple you'd see in a John Lewis advert. Good-looking, successful, and nauseatingly happy. Tom worked as a project manager for a construction firm, pulling in a decent salary. Sarah was a freelance graphic designer, working from their swanky flat in Camden. They had no kids, a couple of houseplants they jokingly called their children, and a social media feed full of date nights and weekend getaways. But then, Tom leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper, and said, "It's all a lie, Dr. Harper." My ears pricked up. A lie? What was he on about? He described how the Instagram perfect life was a facade. Behind closed doors, Sarah wasn't the charming, creative type she portrayed. According to Tom, she had a temper that could make a drill sergeant flinch, and she wasn't afraid to use her fists to make a point. The first incident. A shocking revelation when things took a dark turn. Tom recounted the first time Sarah hit him about 2 years into their marriage. They'd been arguing about something trivial, whose turn it was to do the dishes, of all things. Sarah, he said, snapped. She grabbed a rolling pin from the kitchen counter and whacked him across the arm. Hard. I was so shocked I just stood there, Tom admitted, his face flushing with embarrassment. I mean, who expects their wife to go full Gordon Ramsay with a rolling pin? I scribbled furiously in my notebook, trying to process this. A rolling pin? It sounded like something out of a sitcom, but Tom's expression told me it was no laughing matter. He said the incidents escalated from there. Slaps, punches, even a time she threw a wine glass at his head during a row about his work hours. Each story was more surreal than the last, and I couldn't shake the question. Why was a man like Tom, big, strong, capable, letting this happen? Why didn't he leave? Busting the big myth debunking the just walk away assumption. Now I know what you're thinking. Mate, why didn't you just pack a bag and leg it? It's the first question everyone asks when they hear about someone staying in an abusive relationship, especially a bloke. Let's bust that myth right now. Leaving isn't as simple as it sounds, not for anyone, man or woman. Tom explained it in a way that hit me like a ton of bricks. Dr. Harper, he said, his voice cracking, I love her. Or at least, I thought I did. And she's not always like this. Sometimes she's the Sarah I fell in love with. Funny. Kind. The woman who made me believe in soulmates. That's the trap of abuse. The good moments make you question the bad ones. Add to that the shame. Tom admitted he felt humiliated admitting his wife was hitting him. What kind of man lets that happen? He asked, echoing a toxic stereotype we need to chuck in the bin. I also dug into the practical side. Tom and Sarah owned their flat together. Their finances were intertwined, and Sarah had a knack for making Tom feel like he'd be nothing without her. She'd say, "You're lucky I put up with you," he told me. I started believing it. That's not love. That's manipulation, and it was keeping Tom trapped. The power dynamic. Who's really in control? A glimpse into Sarah's tactics. As our sessions continued, I started piecing together the dynamic between Tom and Sarah. Sarah wasn't just physically aggressive. She was a master of emotional warfare. Tom described how she'd criticize his every move. His cooking was pathetic. His friends were losers. His job was beneath her. She'd alternate between tearing him down and love-bombing him with affection, keeping him on an emotional roller coaster. One story stuck with me. Tom had planned a surprise birthday dinner for Sarah at a posh restaurant. He'd saved up for weeks to afford it. But when they got there, Sarah mocked the place, saying it was tacky and something a cheapskate would pick. Later that night, she slapped him for embarrassing her in front of the waiter. I sat there, gobsmacked, thinking, this woman's got some nerve. But here's where it gets weirder. Tom mentioned Sarah's family, a tight-knit clan who treated her like the golden child. Her parents, her brother, even her cousins seemed to worship the ground she walked on. Whenever Tom tried to stand up to her, Sarah would call her family, and suddenly he'd be getting angry texts from her brother or a lecture from her mom about keeping Sarah happy. It was like Sarah had her own personal army, and Tom was fighting a losing battle. The red flags, I couldn't ignore patterns that screamed trouble. By our third session, I was spotting red flags left, right, and center. First, Sarah's behavior wasn't just abusive, it was calculated. She never hit Tom in public or left marks where others could see. Second, her family's involvement felt off. Why were they so quick to defend her? And third, Tom's self-esteem was in tatters. He'd started to believe he deserved the abuse, which is a classic sign of someone who's been gaslit into oblivion. I also noticed something chilling. Tom was terrified of Sarah finding out he was in therapy. If she knew I was talking to you, he whispered, she'd lose it. That raised a big question. What was Sarah hiding? Was she just a volatile person, or was there something deeper at play? I decided to probe further, asking Tom to bring in specific examples, like text messages or incidents he could recall in detail. What he shared next blew the lid off everything. Below is part 3 of the story, continuing the main content section as requested. I've streamlined the number of blocks to focus on a cohesive narrative while diving deeper into the ethical dilemmas I faced as a psychologist. The tone remains informal, friendly, and engaging with a touch of humor, formatted with short paragraphs and fewer subheadings for a smoother flow. The story is in English, narrated by Dr. Emily Harper, tailored for an English audience in a Reddit-style, audio-friendly, dramatic narrative. This part expands on Tom's revelations, introduces ethical challenges, and keeps the intrigue high to retain viewers, with a focus on ethical considerations as per your request. Part 3. Digging deeper into Tom's nightmare. Welcome back, you curious lot, to the 3rd chapter of this absolutely bonkers case that turned my therapy room into a scene from a psychological thriller. If you're just joining us, go watch parts 1 and 2, because you're missing out on some serious tea. For those keeping up, let's dive back into Tom's world, a place where his wife, Sarah, is calling the shots, and not in a, honey, please take out the bins kind of way. As I peeled back the layers of their marriage, I hit a wall of ethical questions that made me question my role as a psychologist. Grab a biscuit, and let's get stuck in. The evidence that changed everything. Tom's sessions were starting to feel like episodes of a true crime podcast. By our 4th meeting, he was opening up more, but he was still cagey, like he was scared Sarah had bugged my office. I gently pushed him to share something tangible, anything to help me understand the scale of what he was dealing with. That's when he pulled out his phone, hands trembling, and showed me a series of text messages from Sarah. The texts were chilling. One read, "You're pathetic, Tom. Don't bother coming home if you're going to cry about it." Another said, "You think anyone else would put up with you? Good luck." These weren't just angry rants. They were calculated, designed to make Tom feel small. But the kicker? A voicemail Sarah left after one of their fights. I put on my headphones, and her voice, calm, cold, almost smug, sent shivers down my spine. "You'll regret making me mad, Tom," she said. "You always do." I sat back, trying to keep my cool, but inside I was reeling. This wasn't just abuse, it was psychological warfare. As a psychologist, I'm trained to stay neutral, but I'm human too. Seeing Tom, a man who'd been beaten down emotionally and physically, made my heart ache. But here's where things got tricky. The ethics of my job started knocking on my door, loud and clear. Wrestling with ethical dilemmas. As Tom shared more, I found myself at a crossroads. My first duty is to my client's safety, but Tom wasn't ready to report Sarah to the police or even leave her. He kept saying, "I just want to understand why she's like this, Dr. Harper." That's a valid goal in therapy, but when someone's in danger, I have to weigh whether I'm helping or enabling by keeping things confidential. The British Psychological Society's Code of Ethics is crystal clear. If there's a risk of serious harm, I might need to break confidentiality. But was Tom at that point? I also had to consider Sarah. As much as her behavior horrified me, she wasn't my client, and I only had Tom's side of the story. What if he was exaggerating? Or worse, what if there was something he wasn't telling me? I've seen cases where clients twist the truth, not out of malice, but because trauma warps their perspective. Ethically, I had to stay open-minded, even if my gut was screaming, "Sarah's bad news." Then there was the question of Tom's shame. He begged me not to tell anyone. not even in a professional consultation, because he was terrified of being judged. Men don't get beaten by their wives, he said, echoing a stereotype that makes my blood boil. Society's toxic expectations were keeping him silent, and I had to respect his autonomy while gently challenging that mindset. It was like walking a tightrope in a storm. One wrong move, and I could lose his trust. A disturbing pattern emerges. To get a clearer picture, I asked Tom to walk me through a typical week in their marriage. What he described was a masterclass in control. Sarah dictated everything: where they went, who they saw, even what Tom wore. If he dared deviate, she'd punish him, either with a slap or a tirade that left him feeling worthless. One story stuck with me. Tom bought a new jacket, nothing fancy, just something he liked. Sarah took one look at it, called it embarrassing, and cut it to shreds with kitchen scissors while he watched. "That's not normal, Tom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded, but his eyes were glassy, like he was still convincing himself it was his fault. What struck me was Sarah's precision. She never lashed out in front of others, and she always followed her outbursts with apologies. Flowers, dinners, promises to change. It's a classic cycle of abuse, but seeing it play out in real time was gut-wrenching. I also learned more about Sarah's family, who seemed to be her personal cheerleading squad. Tom mentioned her brother, Mark, who'd once cornered him at a family barbecue and told him, "Don't upset Sarah, mate. You don't want to see her really angry." The way Tom said it with a nervous laugh made me wonder, was Mark just protective, or was he in on something bigger? My spidey senses were tingling, but I had to stay professional and not jump to conclusions. The weight of knowing too much. By our 6th session, I was carrying Tom's story like a backpack full of bricks. Every detail he shared painted a darker picture, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. Sarah's behavior was too controlled, too deliberate. Was she just a bully? Or was there a motive behind her actions? And why was Tom so reluctant to take action? Was it fear, love, or something else entirely? Ethically, I had to balance supporting Tom with pushing him toward safety. I started introducing coping strategies, ways to de-escalate conflicts, set boundaries, or even document the abuse if he ever decided to go to the authorities. But each suggestion felt like a drop in the ocean. Tom was drowning, and I was starting to wonder if I could help him swim to shore without breaking every rule in my ethical playbook. Cliffhanger. A hint of what's to come. Just when I thought I'd heard it all, Tom dropped a bombshell that turned this case upside down. In our next session, he revealed a secret about Sarah's past that made me question everything. Not just her, but Tom himself. Part 4 is where things get properly mental, with a twist that'll have you shouting at your screen. Want to know what Sarah was hiding? Or why Tom's story might not be as straightforward as it seems? Smash that subscribe button, hit the bell, and drop a comment with your guesses. What's Sarah's secret, and is Tom telling the whole truth? This story's about to take a turn you won't believe, so don't miss it. The bombshell. Sarah's secret. Past. A revelation that turned everything upside down. It was a gloomy Thursday afternoon, and Tom walked into my office looking like he hadn't slept in a week. His usual nervous fidgeting was gone, replaced by an eerie calm that made my psychologist senses tingle. "Dr. Harper," he said barely above a whisper, "there's something I haven't told you about Sarah." I leaned forward, pen poised, ready for another grim tale of her temper. But what he said next? I wasn't ready. Nobody could have been. Tom revealed that Sarah had a history of violence before they met, a history her family had gone to great lengths to bury. Apparently, in her early 20s, Sarah had been involved in a serious altercation with an ex-boyfriend. The details were murky, but Tom had overheard Sarah's brother Mark talking about it years ago during a drunken family gathering. The ex ended up in hospital with a broken arm, and Sarah walked away without charges because her family sorted it out. Sorted it out? What did that mean? Bribes, threats, or just a really good lawyer? I sat there, gobsmacked, trying to process this. Sarah wasn't just abusive, she had a pattern. And her family, who I'd already clocked as suspiciously loyal, were complicit in covering it up. Tom admitted he'd dismissed the story at first, thinking it was a one-off or exaggerated. But after years of her hitting him, he started to wonder, was Sarah's violence a personality flaw, or was she hiding something darker? Maybe even a psychological condition her family was desperate to keep under wraps. The second twist. Tom's hidden agenda when the victim becomes the puzzle. Just as I was reeling from Sarah's secret, Tom dropped another bombshell that made me question everything. He admitted he hadn't been entirely honest with me. "Dr. Harper," he said, his eyes fixed on the floor, "I've been recording Sarah. For months." My heart skipped a beat. Recording? As in secret audio of her outbursts? He pulled out his phone and played a clip, 30 seconds of Sarah screaming, calling him names, and then a sickening thud that sounded like a punch. I felt my stomach churn. It was undeniable proof of her abuse, but it also raised a massive ethical red flag. In the UK, secretly recording someone without their consent is a legal gray area, especially in a private home. As a psychologist, I was thrilled to have evidence that could protect Tom, but I was also horrified. Had he been playing me, drip-feeding me half-truths to build a case? Was he genuinely seeking help, or was this a calculated move to trap Sarah? I asked him why he'd kept this from me, and his answer hit hard. I didn't trust anyone, not even you, to believe me without proof. Men don't get taken seriously in these situations. That statement was a gut punch. Tom wasn't just fighting Sarah. He was fighting a society that mocks male victims of abuse. His recordings were his insurance policy, but they also meant he'd been sitting on a ticking time bomb. If Sarah found out, who knew how she'd react? And if he went public, her family's influence might bury him instead. The consequences. A house of cards collapsing, what this meant for Tom. These revelations turned Tom's case into a high-stakes chess game. The recordings gave him leverage, but they also put him in danger. Sarah's family clearly had resources and a history of sweeping her behavior under the rug. If Tom confronted her or went to the police, he risked retaliation, not just from Sarah, but from her entire clan. I could see the fear in his eyes as he talked about Mark, her brother, who'd once joked about making problems disappear. Was it an empty threat, or a hint at something sinister? For Tom, the truth about Sarah's past was both liberating and terrifying. It validated his experiences. Her abuse wasn't his fault, and it wasn't isolated, but it also meant he was trapped in a marriage with someone potentially unhinged, backed by a family who'd do anything to protect her. He was starting to see a way out, but the path was littered with landmines. What this meant for me. As Dr. Emily Harper, I was in over my head. Ethically, I was torn. Tom's safety was my priority, but his recordings complicated everything. If I encouraged him to use them, I'd be endorsing a legally dubious tactic. If I reported the abuse myself, I'd break his trust and possibly expose him to danger. The British Psychological Society's guidelines were screaming in my head. Do no harm, but act if there's imminent risk. Was Sarah a risk to Tom's life? I didn't know, but the hospitalized ex-boyfriend story wasn't exactly reassuring. I also had to confront my own biases. I'd been quick to believe Tom's story because he seemed genuine, but his secrecy made me wonder if I'd missed something. Was he manipulating me to get sympathy, or was he just a desperate man doing whatever it took to survive? My job was to help him find clarity, but I was drowning in questions myself. What this meant for Sarah, the enigma at the heart of this mess, was no longer just an abuser in my mind. She was a puzzle. If her past violence was real, why had it been covered up? Was she struggling with untreated mental health issues, or was she simply a bully who'd learned she could get away with it? Her family's role suggested a deeper conspiracy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah's perfect persona was a mask for something far uglier. The implications were massive. If Tom exposed her, her reputation, career, and family's influence could come crashing down. The moment of truth. By the end of that session, I knew we'd reached a turning point. Tom was ready to act. He just didn't know how. He looked at me, eyes pleading, and said, "Dr. Harper, what do I do? I can't keep living like this, but I'm scared of what she'll do if I leave." I took a deep breath, knowing my next words could change his life. I told him we'd make a safety plan together, steps to protect himself, whether he stayed or left. But inside, I was terrified. This wasn't just a therapy session anymore. It was a lifeline, and the stakes couldn't be higher. How it all went down. In our last sessions, Tom and I crafted a safety plan. He decided to confront Sarah, armed with his recordings and a lawyer on speed dial. He moved out to a mate's flat for safety, then sent Sarah a message. "We need to talk, or I go public." Sarah, predictably, flipped. Her texts were a mix of rage and fake apologies. But when Tom played her the voicemail of her abuse, she went silent. For the first time, she knew she was caught. Sarah's family tried to intervene, with her brother Mark showing up at Tom's workplace, all bluster and threats. But Tom was done cowering. He filed for divorce and handed his recordings to the police, who opened an investigation. Sarah's perfect facade cracked. Her family's influence couldn't bury this one. Last I heard, she was facing charges, and her graphic design career was toast after clients caught wind of the scandal. Tom's new chapter, a bittersweet victory. Tom's not out of the woods yet. Divorce is messy, and healing from years of abuse takes time. But he's in therapy, not with me, to keep things ethical, and rebuilding his life. He told me he's even started dating again, though he's taking it slow. "I'm learning to trust myself," he said, and I nearly teared up. For a man who walked into my office broken, that's a bloody miracle. Ethically, I wrestled with my role. Did I push Tom too hard to act? Should I have reported Sarah myself? In the end, I stuck to my duty, support the client, respect their choices. But I'll be honest, this case haunts me. It's a reminder that abuse doesn't care about gender, and society's stereotypes can trap anyone. Why? This matters, the big picture. This wasn't just Tom's story. It's a wake-up call. Domestic abuse against men is real, underreported and mocked. Sarah's power came from knowing Tom wouldn't be believed, and her family's cover-up shows how far people will go to protect a lie. If Tom's tale teaches us anything, it's to listen, believe, and challenge the stigma. And maybe, just maybe, check who you're marrying before you say, "I do." If this story hit you in the feels, smash that like button and share it with your mates. Let's get people talking about this stuff. Subscribe and ring the bell for more wild tales from my therapy room. I've got plenty more where this came from. What do you think? Did Tom get the justice he deserved? Or should Sarah's family face the music too? Have you ever known someone stuck in a toxic relationship? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I'm dying to hear what you lot make of this. Until next time, stay kind and keep your rolling pins in the kitchen.